"Daddy!" From the monitor on my nightstand, I could see my son staring expectantly into the camera above his crib. My wife rolled over next to me, turning away from the unwelcome light and noise. Asked for by name, she mumbled, her voice weary and rough, from soothing my boy's discomfort as his incisors dug their way up to the surface. "Daddy!" I grumbled slightly as I rummaged through the fridge, and then creaked along to Ethan's room. I inched the door open as smoothly as I could, and was greeted with my own reflection. The crib sat in front of a closet with mirror sliding doors, the sort of style choice that had gone out with the popcorn ceiling and wooden paneling. "Daddy!" Ethan raised his arms towards me, and as I gathered him up, I tried the bottle and the teeth and ring, but he only turned his head back and forth in protest. I checked his diaper, but found it dry and clean. Finally, having enough of my efforts, he let out an air-raid siren of a wail. The wall between his bedroom and ours was thick, the house having stood since the early 1920s, but not so thick that my wife could remain sleeping through much more of that barrage. Listening to us read always had a calming effect on Ethan, and so I carried him to the living room, avoiding the toys spread out across the floor, and began to look over to our small collection of children's books. We pretty much got in all of them from the Lewis family next door. They've been lucky and bought their house at the bottom of the market, but with 2 kids, each one now needing their own room, it was time for them to move on. We'd picked up a load of things for Ethan that day: a radio flyer wagon, a rocking horse, and some stuffed animals. One was a pot-bellied wolf with a red checkered shirt and huge felt triangles for teeth. "Oh, wait until you see what's inside his belly," Jeff Lewis had said to me, indicating a Velcro line running down the toy's middle. I pried it apart with a loud sucking sound and found inside a tiny doll with horn-rimmed glasses, gray yawn for hair, and a remarkably calm face for an elderly woman that had been swallowed whole. "The big bad wolf?" I asked. "Yeah, came with one of those picture books we got for the girls. Creepy, right?" He gestured over to a knee-high pile of brightly colored books next to a pair of strollers that his girls had long since stopped needing. "You guys want any?" For the price of $1, we got a dozen classics: Peter Rabbit, The Cat in the Hat, and Goodnight Moon. All stories most folks can remember from their own childhood. But as I was arranging them on our shelves, I came across one with a plain blue cover that I didn't remember grabbing. There was no title or author listed, and when I opened it, I found that this book had no stamp on the inside of the cover proclaiming "Property of Emily Lewis," as all the others had. Standing there, desperate for Ethan to stop crying, I decided to give it a try. What you see in the mirror is not all there is, and Lil Timmy Mcgee looked at a face that was not quite his. I read out loud as I settled down on the couch. The line was odd, and I felt my nose crunch up as though I smelled something foul. But Ethan gazed raptly at the picture open in front of him and drank deeply from his bottle. Seeing that this story held his interest, I kept going, finding myself sliding into that sing-song voice I always seem to use when reading to Ethan. The little man, who long ago should have been in bed, or at least that's what Mom and Dad had said, could not say exactly what was out of place, but knew in his heart of hearts that this was not his face. The illustration on the page showed a little boy wearing PJs the same blue as the front of the book. He was staring into the bathroom mirror, his face a quizzical blank. His reflection faced him, wearing that same expression. I looked again at the picture and thought that if there was a difference in between the illustration of Timmy and his reflection, I couldn't see it. The artist had drawn Timmy's mouth with a simple blank line that pulled down to the right side of his face in a grimace. Sure, it was a crude drawing, intentionally so, but it conveyed pretty neatly that for a kid in footy pajamas, Timmy was certainly dealing with a puzzler. Daddy had looked him up and down, and was certain that it was still his son's 2 feet that stood on the ground. Mommy said he shouldn't have a care, for it was without a doubt his dimpled cheeks puffing out the same air. I smiled at that, but as the previous page glided down, the next revealed Timmy staring out at the reader with a deep and careworn expression lining his tiny little face. It might have been the early hour, or the fact that I hadn't gotten a solid night's sleep in a while, but it took me a minute of staring at the image before I could put my finger on what was wrong with it. On the page, 2 sets of eyes staring back at us. Timmy was facing out, looking right at us, and so was his reflection. I snapped the book shut and involuntarily flung it to the far end of the couch. After a moment, Ethan let out a confused and wounded wail, and I looked over towards the bedroom where my wife slept. I retrieved the storybook and sat back down, scolding myself for freaking out. Clearly I'd let sleep deprivation and the absolute stillness of my own house at 3 a.m. put my nerves on edge. I opened to what I thought was the same page, but Timmy was once again facing the mirror, and it was only his twin, his reflection, that stared out at my son and me. I flipped back and forth, thinking that I must have seen it earlier or later in the story, but I didn't find it. I was certain that there had to be 2 identical faces, drawn with matching flat eyes, glaring up from the page, except that identical wasn't the right word. Timmy had looked blank, worn the face of someone who had seen too much, but his reflection had been smiling with a wide, wild show of teeth. Its eyes had been oddly large and alive with delight. As my eyes searched through the pages for some explanation, Ethan's increasing irritation convinced me to begin to reading again. The nose, yes, it was mostly the same, and he was certain his thoughts were rolling across the same little brain. His breath was no sweeter, his hair no neater. His eyes were still green and not blue, so what his parents said had to be true. The next page had a reassured-looking Timmy leaning away from the mirror, the worry lines around his saucer-like eyes fading. He leaned back and let out a breath. He was not an Andy, a Gary, or a Seth. He was little Timmy Mcgee, just as he'd always be. That felt like a pretty good place to put an end in. All that was left was to drop in a moral about accepting yourself or something like that, and we'd be done with this. Timmy would crawl into bed, and then hopefully so would Ethan. "It's good to be me," said the relieved little boy, who was still Timmy Mcgee. But then there came a tap, a sound against the glass, like a little slap. "You're little Timmy Mcgee, age 3, and you are just like me. The teeth, the eyes. To look too closely is probably unwise." A voice like his cried from the mirror's other side. But Timmy did lean in and saw a smile spread too thin, too wide. There was too many teeth, and it was all wrong inside. Truth be told, out here it's ever so cold. We've been here for quite a while. Please stay and give us a smile. We're full up to the brim and ready to come in and say hello to our little friend, Tim. I stifled a yelp as there was a cold splash against my leg. The bottle had fallen from my son's grip and icy milk leaked between its threaded sims. He looked up at me with heavy-lidded eyes. He pressed his cheek against my chest and let out a deep, rattling sigh. My blurry vision took in the clock, and somehow 2 full hours had passed. A moment or two later, he was deep asleep, and I was sliding the book onto the shelf with an unmistakable sense of relief. I thought that I could go my whole life without ever knowing what became of Timmy Mcgee. I moved as quietly as I could to Ethan's room, nearly aware of every groan rising from the floorboards as I walked down the hallway, which felt like it was a mile long. I had rarely been so tired. My eyelids kept sliding down in front of me during my trudge, and my thoughts moved like greasy sludge. I lowered him down into his bed, and I heard a chime as if in my head. I looked into the mirror, and with dawning fear, realized I was not the only one here. I counted as the little one began to snore. In the mirror, there was him and me and one more. In my mind, new ideas began to grind. These notions were not mine. They've taken up rhythm, they've taken on rhyme, and once again, I heard the chime. I shook my head violently, trying to dislodge the strangeness of those foreign thoughts. My knees buckled, and I gripped the edge of Ethan's crib to keep from pitching over into it. "I'm just tired," I said. "Or it's something I ate." Words to that effect. I said them over and over again, anything it took to make the world a rational place again. I looked down through watery eyes at my son, sleeping peacefully with his thumb in his mouth, blissfully unaware that anything at all was happening. With each repetition, my breathing slowed and my vision cleared. But then, there came a tap, a sound against the glass, like a little slap. I've been standing here staring at myself in the mirror for the better part of 2 hours. The sun has broken the horizon, and the room is starting to get hot. Normally my wife would have gotten up to turn the air on, but I haven't heard her move. It's not like her to stay in bed this long. I can't think about that though. If I let my focus slip, do or think about anything other than looking into this mirror, the rhyme comes back. I have to fight like a drowning man to claw it back out again, and after, I feel so weak, like the weight of my own body could buckle my knees at any moment. If I look away or blink, I think it moves without me. A smile, a twitch, as it inches itself closer. But why? I have no idea. You see, I didn't finish the book. That damn blue book on the shelf. That damn blue book all by itself. I don't know the end of the story of Timmy Mcgee, and I'm afraid that how it ended for him is how it'll end for me.